Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, I'm David Kramer here with Alaska Weather. As always, please visit our website at weather.gov/Alaska. You can check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we have out there, or get any updates to the forecast. You can also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391. Get updates to the forecast through that means as well. And you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on YouTube. We'll start off with a quick look at some upcoming rainfall that we have for the Prince William Sound area, especially the eastern side from the Valdez area out further to the east. And that is going to start later on Sunday evening through Tuesday. It's going to come in two different rounds, one mostly on Monday and then one again on Tuesday, which does leave some uncertainty in the numbers. But right now what we have forecasted out there is over 4 inches for the Cordova area. And even though this isn't on the image here, further out east towards the Yakutat area, quite a bit of rain expected there as well. So that caused us to have a watch out there, a flood watch out for the Cordova area that is going to be valid from Monday morning through late Tuesday night. Again, the rain is going to start Sunday evening, pick up more on Monday, so that watch is starting Monday morning again out through late Tuesday night. We also have a wind advisory out for the eastern part of the Alaska Range, and that is for areas west of the Tote Cutoff, and that is going to be valid from currently until 4 a.m. on Saturday. And there's the potential for wind gusts to get as high as 55 miles per hour out there. Again, Alaska Range, the eastern part of the Alaska Range, west of the Tote Cutoff. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery, starting off here in the part of the Gulf, you can kind of see the rotation around our old low that had brought a lot of rain to the south central area, still bringing some rain to the area, but starting to die out now. And as we watch again, we'll see a little bit further to the north, we have another upper level low up here that's bringing in some cloud cover instability over much of the western part of the state, some shower activity associated with that low. Then we have two lows out west. One is pretty easy to see out here in the western part of the Bering Sea. That low is kind of dying out now, but you can see its old frontal system pushing through the central part of the Bering. And then one more time we'll watch and look just below here, the Aleutian Islands, and we have a low forming underneath much of that higher cloud cover that's starting to push out under the, or further to the east of the central Aleutian Islands. And as we look at our current weather for the remainder of the day, you can see where that low pressure system is. Front with that, bringing in rain to the central and eastern part of the Aleutian Islands. But we're really going to keep our eye on this system because as it starts to track to the east, that's going to be the one that ends up giving a lot of rain to the whole North Gulf Coast as we move into early next week. So we also have our low out in the western part of the Bering Sea, bringing rain to the central Bering and the Pribilof Islands. We have some more isolated and scattered showers over much of the west coast from the Bristol Bay area up all the way to the Point Hope area. Much of the interior and south central is going to be covered with those showers as well. And there is the potential this afternoon and evening for more isolated thunderstorms to develop in the central and eastern part of the interior. Up along the Arctic coastline, we do have some fog up there that's expected to remain throughout the evening. And then lighter rain all along the North Gulf Coast and some lighter showers as we get into parts of the Panhandle. Then for tonight, going to continue to see some lighter rain in some areas of the Panhandle, but as this high pressure starts to push further in, going to really drive off a lot of that rain for that area. Along the North Gulf Coast, going to continue to see some lingering showers overnight, starting to diminish, especially as we get further to the north. In the central and eastern part of the interior, going to see some of that rain developing there. But as we get into the Brooks Range, going to be cold enough to start seeing a lot of mixture with snow up in the mountains especially. Then along the Arctic coastline, going to continue to see fog all night up there. Down in the Kotzebue Sound area, some rain as we get to some of the higher elevations on the Seward Peninsula. Going to see some snow mixing in there tonight. And then down through the rest of the west coast, through the Bristol Bay area, going to see some rain developing further tonight with that southerly flow that we have. And then our low that is now south of the eastern Aleutian Islands, bringing in southerly flow and rain to places of the Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian Islands, and on the back side of the low, we're going to see some more showers out by the central Aleutian Islands. On Saturday, our low, as it starts to get more development, it's going to get some upper level support, and we'll see when we go to our flight level winds, all that northerly flow really driving into this trough, really deepening the trough and the low and starting to strengthen it again. And it's going to get eventually more support from the south as well and tap into some moisture there. And we're starting to see some of the strengthening now here on Saturday of this low. And bringing in more rain all throughout the Alaska Peninsula area, Kodiak Island, eastern Aleutian Islands. And then way out west here, we do have high pressure building and clearing out a lot of the rain for the western Aleutians. Up along the west coast of the state, going to continue to see rain lighter as we get closer to the Seward Peninsula, but lasting out through the Arctic coastline now. And along the Arctic coastline, just some light showers associated with some of that lower stratus expected up there. And then down into the south central part of the state, going to see some rain developing there on Saturday. Strongest to the west, but that's going to start to push further to the east as we move throughout the day on Saturday. And then high pressure now pushing in over the Panhandle area, clearing out all the rain over there. Then on Sunday, that high pressure is pushed off to the north and east. And now our frontal system with this low tracking slowly to the east is going to bring more rain throughout areas of the Gulf, starting to bring rain into the Panhandle area more as we push further into the afternoon hours on Sunday. And as this system pushes north into the North Gulf Coast, again Sunday evening, we're really going to start to see this front push into the area, bringing a lot more rain to the North Gulf Coast area and much of the rest of South Central as well. However, the interior, especially central eastern parts, should remain pretty dry up through eastern parts of the Brooks Range as well and along the Arctic coastline. Western part of the state going to see a lot of instability and a lot of showers up there, stretching all the way down the west coast of the state. And we are going to see some rain coming into the Bristol Bay area as well from our low further to the south. And then on the back side of this system, we are going to see rain for the Pribilof Islands, eastern Aleutians, and central Aleutian Islands. Our high pressure out there is starting to get squeezed out now and diminishing as well. But the big story is our low here south of the Alaska Peninsula, and now that's going to start to really stall out in this area and dig in as it taps into that moisture from the south, and you see this southerly flow behind the front that is just going to continue through the first couple days of next week, and that's what's going to bring a lot of that moisture and a lot of that rain to the North Gulf Coast. For our temperatures, as of 3 p.m. this afternoon, starting off in the Panhandle area, mid to upper 50s for much of the Panhandle, a little bit closer to 60 as we get further to the south, with Ketchikan at 61 degrees this afternoon. For much of south central Alaska, lower to mid 50s, a couple places a little bit colder there. Whittier and Talkeetna both at 47 this afternoon. Up into the interior part of the state, western parts of the interior, upper 40s. Warmer as we get to the central and eastern parts of the interior, mid to upper 50s, with Delta Junction being a little bit warmer, 61 degrees there, and Fort Yukon a little bit colder, 46. Brooks Range we're seeing in the mid to upper 40s, and then as we get along the Arctic coastline, primarily the upper 30s, but out west we are seeing a little bit warmer to the 40s there. In the 40s for the most part for the Kotzebue Sound area as well as the Norton Sound area. Gamble out there at 43 degrees. Down in the YK Delta area, mid 40s, Bethel there at 50 degrees. Lower 50s for much of the Bristol Bay area, Alaska Peninsula, and eastern Aleutian Islands. As we move out towards the central and western Aleutian Islands, mid to lower 40s there, with Adak being a little bit warmer, 54 degrees. And then the Pribilof Islands, upper 40s. As we move into lows tonight, dropping only down to the mid 40s for the Pribilof Islands, upper 40s for much of the Aleutian Islands, including the Alaska Peninsula. Bristol Bay area going to drop down into the lower 40s, upper 30s to lower 40s for the YK Delta area. All around the Seward Peninsula, lower 40s to right around 40 degrees, Nome there at 39. Mid to upper 30s along the Arctic coastline. In the interior, upper 30s to lower 40s, warmer out east. And then down in the south central part of the state, lower 40s for the most part. Copper River Basin a little bit colder there. Glen Allen 38 degrees for a low tonight. And mid to upper 40s for much of the Panhandle area, a little bit warmer as we get further to the south. Highs for tomorrow, upper 50s for the most part, getting as high as 60 degrees. And then as we move into the south central area, mid to lower 50s for highs tomorrow. Mid to right around 60 degrees for the interior. Fairbanks going to be the warmest there at 61 degrees. Up along the Arctic coastline, lower to mid 40s. For the Kotzebue Sound area, mid to upper 40s for the most part. Kotzebue itself going to be a little bit warmer, 50 degrees. Right around 50 degrees for the Norton Sound area, YK Delta area, and down into the Bristol Bay area. And then lower 50s throughout the Aleutian Islands, 50 degrees for St. Paul's high tomorrow. Aviation weather, widespread MVFR conditions throughout the Bering and Aleutians, with some areas of IFR by the eastern Aleutian Islands. MVFR and IFR all along the Arctic coastline and the Brooks Range. Along the North Gulf Coast, quite a bit of IFR, and central and western parts of the Alaska Range as well. And as we get further away from the Gulf and the Panhandle, going to see some MVFR conditions there. Those should clear up in the afternoon, however. Still going to have a lot of MVFR along the North Gulf Coast in the afternoon time, as well as the western parts of the Alaska Range. Brooks Range and Arctic coastline going to continue to see MVFR conditions throughout the day. Down through the western part of the state, a lot of MVFR, including Bristol Bay area, and then much of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands going to continue to see MVFR conditions in the afternoon. Eastern Aleutians into the Alaska Peninsula going to see some IFR conditions remaining there in the afternoon. For the passes, starting off up north, AKwx Pass going to start off IFR, improve to MVFR. Adigan Pass is going to be the same. Lake Clark and Merrill going to both remain marginal throughout the day. Rainy Pass also going to be MVFR conditions tomorrow. Windy Pass starting off marginal, improving to VFR conditions in the afternoon. Isabel Pass should stay VFR throughout the day, as well as Mentasta Pass. Tanita Pass will start off marginal, improve to VFR. Portage will start off and remain in VFR throughout the day tomorrow. And Chilkoot and White will both start off with marginal conditions and improve to VFR conditions later in the day. For our freezing levels, you can see our coldest air coming here out of the Bering Strait area, extending out over much of the lower part of the southern part of the state, out towards the Yakutat area, but we have some higher freezing levels down there by the Panhandle area, up to as high as 12,000 feet. And then out over the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, we have some of that cold air dipping down over the central Aleutian Islands, but out by the western Aleutian Islands, as high as 10,000 feet there. For our icing, starting off in the Alaska Peninsula area, we do have between 4,000 and 8,000 feet there, stretching up along the west coast of the state, dropping down a little bit between 2,000 and 5,000 feet up into the Brooks Range area, down into the south central area, extending out towards Yakutat between 3,000 and 7,000 feet there. For our jet stream, we do have a jet streak coming towards the Kodiak Island area of a southwesterly direction, 75 knots. And then over the southern portions of the Panhandle, 130 knot jet out of that southwesterly direction. And you can really see the part of the jet that's really going to dig down into this trough that's going to help intensify this low and really pull up that moisture from the south. It's coming in at 155 knots out of a northwesterly direction, and another jet streak coming in at 75 knots out by the western Aleutian Islands. Dropping down to 9,000 feet, northerly flow out over much of the Bering as high as 40 knots as we get closer towards the central Aleutian Islands. Then as we have our trough in these two lows out over the western part of the state down through the Alaska Peninsula, we have southerly flow coming up through the Gulf and over much of mainland Alaska. As high as 30 knots over western portions of the state, and then 20 to 25 knots out of a southwesterly direction over the Panhandle. Down to 3,000 feet, pretty weak flow over the Panhandle area, west to southwest flow around 10 knots there, southerly flow over mainland Alaska, 20 to 25 knots for the most part, getting a little bit weaker as we get up by the Arctic coastline, only around 10 knots there. And then northerly flow through much of the Bering area, 15 to 25 knots, strongest as we get further to the west, and stronger again as we get by the Aleutians, as high as 35 knots out of a northerly direction for the central Aleutians. We have turbulence out there for the Aleutian Islands, starting off western and central Aleutians below 4,000 feet there, up to as high as 5,000 feet as we get to the eastern Aleutian Islands, and below 6,000 as we get into the Bristol Bay and Kodiak Island areas. We'll be back shortly with the marine forecast.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Thoman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that. That's
correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7-day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks? Where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often we don't, at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook, and on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Tolman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back. We'll take a quick look here at the ice edge. You can see it way out east, at least 100 miles from the shoreline there near Kaktovik, and well over 100 miles as we look out towards Barrow and places further to the west to the ice edge. It is still melting right now with those high sea surface temperatures, and as per a normal year, we are expecting it to continue to diminish out into mid to late September, as is the normal time of the minimum for the ice pack for Alaska's area. Taking a look now at our marine forecast, one quick iteration of our new maps here if you haven't seen them before. We do have a new overlay over the marine areas here where we are showing in the image, it is sea heights, and then you can see some little arrows there indicating winds. The shorter those arrows, the weaker the winds. The longer they are, the stronger the winds. And that's a snapshot of time taken for around 4 p.m., in this case on Saturday, whereas the arrows and numbers are more of an average for the whole day of Saturday. So they can be a little bit different at times. But anyway, in our inside waters, we have southerly flow 10 to 15 knots and weak flow around 10 knots out over the Gulf area. Then on Sunday, we can really start to see some of those seas getting stronger and the winds picking up as we have a front pushing into the area. Southeast flow around 35 knots up in the very northern part of the Gulf with gusts to as high as 50. Inside waters in the Panhandle area, 10 to 15 knots out of a southeasterly direction and 20 to 25 knots in the eastern parts of the Gulf. For south central Alaska, pretty weak flow out east southerly to easterly, 10 to 15 knots, picking up towards the Barren Islands area, 25 knots out of a southeasterly direction there. Then on Saturday, once again, you can really see those greens and blues starting to push into the area. That is sea heights again, and they're getting up to as high as 15 to 18 feet. And you can really see that as it's starting to push in further to the north. Winds as high as 50 knots out of an easterly direction. And then as we get into the northern parts of the Gulf there, around 45 knots easterly direction, and Prince William Sound 30 knots. Then on Saturday for the Alaska Peninsula area, east to southeast flow as high as 40 knots south of the Alaska Peninsula, 20 knots there through the Shelikof Strait area. And then as we move into Sunday, again here you can really see those green colors are indicating those higher sea heights up to as high as 24 feet now south of Kodiak Island, with storm force winds of 50 knots all around Kodiak Island, including Shelikof straight easterly winds there at 50 knots, and then down to as low as 40 knots now south of the Alaska Peninsula. Saturday for the Aleutian Islands, northerly flow 25 to 35 knots, strongest south of the eastern Aleutian Islands. Northwest flow 20 to 25 knots as we get further to the west. Then on Sunday, west to northwest flow 15 to 20 knots out by the western Aleutians, getting a lot stronger as we get closer to the eastern Aleutian Islands. Northerly flow there up to as high as 45 knots. Seas 16 to 17 feet by the eastern Aleutians. Saturday along the west coast of the state, northerly flow for the most part 10 to 15 knots, becoming easterly as we get further south of Nunavik Island there around 20 knots. And then on Sunday, northeasterly flow throughout, weaker up north around 15 knots there, but getting up to 35 to 40 knots as we get south of Nunavik Island and by the Pribilof Islands. Up along the Arctic coastline, kind of variable flow there, 5 to 10 knots, becoming easterly as we get further to the north, 15 knots there. And then as we move into Sunday, kind of variable flow up in the Arctic coastline around 10 knots, but southerly flow along the west coast, getting as high as 25 knots near Point Hope area. Quick recap for the state. We have our low pressure system that's going to really start to deepen and become much stronger as it slowly pushes to the east, going to bring a lot of rain to the North Gulf Coast area, but for tonight it's just going to bring some rain to the eastern Aleutian Islands, to the Alaska Peninsula, southern parts of Kodiak. Up along the west coast, going to continue to see showers, and that's going to extend into much of the interior as well. As you get into the Brooks Range, cold enough to see that mix with some snow and some fog along the Arctic coastline. As we drop down into the south central area, you're going to see some showers around the area and some showers for the Panhandle as well. But as this high pressure continues to build into the Gulf, going to start to push off those showers. So by Saturday, we're not going to see much shower activity out over the Panhandle area. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for being with us tonight.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.